Uh-oh.
In her last two fights. Good way hitting him from that way down.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. The world is still reacting to the news that broke earlier today that Chantel Cameron, after some time and some fights on the Matchroom and DAZN side of things, has decided to leave. Veteran boxing scribe Sasha Jones. Women's Fight News says, best boxing news I've seen in a while. Chantel Cameron has been released from her promotional deal with Matchroom Boxing. I'm ready for the hate for this comment, but I've said for years, Chantel Cameron deserved better than what she was getting at Matchroom.
Is that true?
Is there somewhere else besides Matchroom that Chantel could have been that would have done a better job with her? Did Matchroom fail to do everything they could do for this fighter? And I don't think so. I don't agree with Sasha.
What?
I've been watching Chantel Cameron since she went pro. I've been watching her since the start of her career, and I can wholeheartedly say that Matchroom did a great job with her, so great that I don't think anybody else could have done it.
What?
Gotta go back to the beginning. Chantel Cameron didn't start out with Matchroom. She started out with the lesser-known Cyclone Promotions that was run by Barry McGuigan and his son, Shane. That's where Chantel started out, and she was with them for a couple of fights, but she grew discontent, she was unhappy there, and she eventually left.
Sound familiar?
She left the now defunct Cyclone Promotions for the now defunct MTK Global. That's right.
She was with Cyclone Promotions for something like 7 or 8 fights.
Her first 7 or 8 fights. Then she was with MTK Global, fighting under their banner for something like 3 or 4 fights. All the while, she wasn't very well known.
Very skilled. I could never take anything away from Chantel Cameron's skills. I still think she's one of the most skilled women boxers in the world. But at that time, nobody knew her.
And nobody was talking about her. Not at that time, except for me, on this channel. That she did not receive the level of promotion with either Cyclone Promotions or MTK that she started to get when she jumped into bed with Matchroom. Her first fight under the Matchroom banner was the Adriana Dos Santos fight for what was the vacant WBC title. And it's there. It's right there that she starts getting promoted. It's right there that her career begins to gain some traction. She begins to gain a buzz,
Yes.
a profile.
Yes!
At that time, nobody else, nobody in the industry on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean was making the same investment in women boxers that Matchroom was making.
Boxer didn't exist.
Frank Warren's Queensbury had no female fighters under contract. None. By then, Nicola Adams, the only fighter they signed, she had retired the year before.
In 2019.
So if the criticism is that Matchroom didn't do a good job with Chantel, or that Matchroom didn't do enough, you tell me who would have.
Somebody in America?
Top Rank only had one female fighter signed, only one female fighter under contract, and that was Michaela Mayer. They weren't signing any others.
Let alone a British female fighter, the PBC. The PBC made no investment in women's boxing, let alone towards a Brit.
Looking back, had Matchroom not picked up Chantel Cameron, would she be where she is right now as one of the more familiar faces and established names in the entire sport? That if Matchroom don't pick her up in 2020, say they never signed her and she stuck it out with MTK, you know that MTK eventually went under. The now defunct MTK Global that tried to come back as the rebranded Probellum, which also went under. I guess that If we're imagining a scenario where Matchroom don't sign her, I guess she goes under with them?
Because we're imagining a scenario where Matchroom doesn't pick her up, since they did such a terrible job.
Getting her all of those alphabet titles and unification matches, like the Mary McGee fight, the high-profile fights with the high-profile names that she wasn't getting before, like the Jessica McCaskill fight, the Katie Taylor fights.
You think she was gonna get those fights without Matchroom?
I don't think so, because it would have taken an effort, an investment, that nobody else was making at the time to get Chantel those fights. I think Matchroom did as good of a job as they could have done with that fighter at that time, and even if it is now time to move on, you can't criticize the work they did, because the work they did is what put her in a position where somebody else might pick her up, where somebody else might sign her.
She is now an established name because of the fights they paid for, they made.
And whether or not it even was a good decision to leave Matchroom to go with somebody else is a story that only time can tell, because it hasn't worked out for everyone. Yeah, maybe Natasha Jonas is doing all right and Chris Billum-Smith, but not Lawrence Okoli.
For God's sake, boxers shipping him out to Poland to fight Lucas Rozansky. Sky wouldn't even pay to bring Lucas to him.
They're sending Lawrence to them. And what about Joshua Buatsi?
Is he a star yet?
Matchroom offered him a title shot and a 7-figure payday. Boxer got him a domestic-level guy in Dan Aziz. Is he a superstar? Is he Julio Iglesias over there yet?
Rumor has it that Chantel Cameron just left Matchroom to sign to Queensberry, and they're going to announce it at the end of this week. But who does Queensberry actually have for Chantel to fight?
In the past, Queensberry has not made the same investment in women's boxing that Matchroom has been making, though currently, Chantel would be one of 4 fighters they have under contract. Raven Chapman, Nicola Bark, the Burmese Python, Christine O'Hara,
Chantel Cameron potentially, and I think they're signing Shannon Courtenay too.
That's 5 potentially. And it's good if Queensberry is now making this kind of an investment, but don't tell me that Matchroom didn't do right by Chantel. They did. They did the best that they could do, and their best is the only reason that a Queensberry is deciding to now pick her up.
The promotion she got and the profile she amassed as a result.
She's the woman who beat Katie Taylor, but she only got the Katie Taylor fight because Matchroom made it.
Where she said they wouldn't.
August 3rd, we're going to get this victory, and we're going to stay consistent. We're going to keep fighting until I get you again, Anthony Joshua.
Why is it that after all this time, former unified heavyweight champion Andy Ruiz still has Anthony Joshua on the brain?
Calling for a rematch.
You could argue it's because the last time they fought, Anthony Joshua beat him, but Joseph Parker beat him. Joseph Parker beat Andy Ruiz. He gave him his first professional loss in what was a close and somewhat controversial fight, and I don't see Andy calling for a rematch with Joseph. He's calling for a rematch with Anthony. They're 1-1 with each other. Andy won the first fight, Anthony won the second, both won emphatically.
So what, he wants a tiebreaker?
And another payday. Let's not kid ourselves. The most money that Andy Ruiz Jr. ever made for a fight or fights was with Anthony Joshua. He didn't make with Joseph Parker, he didn't make with Luis Ortiz, or anybody else what he made with Anthony Joshua. I mean, yeah, they're 1-1 with each other, and the rubber match would be the tiebreaker. But if there were no money in the rubber match, if there were no money in Anthony Joshua, who is ranked as one of the top 2 earning boxers in all of boxing, I hardly think that Andy would be calling for it. If he's calling for it, it's because he wants another big payday.
I don't blame him. I'm just saying.
Andy Ruiz has not seen action in well over a year since he won a points decision over Luis Ortiz in September of 2022 after having floored him 2 times. He dropped him 2 times.
I picked Andy Ruiz to win that fight, and he won that fight. Is he gonna win this one?
A rubber match with Anthony Joshua?
No, the upcoming fight he has with Jarrell Miller on August 3rd. On the undercard of Crawford versus Madrimov. That before it becomes about fighting Anthony for a 3rd time or anybody else, he has to make it through that guy.
3-star fight.
Ruiz versus Miller.
For me and my money, that's a 3-star fight. That's a solid fight, an intriguing one. Because while Jarrell, Big Gravy, Big Baby Miller, is coming off a knockout loss to Daniel Dubois, Andy Ruiz is coming off of a lengthy stint of inactivity under normal circumstances. I would go with Andy to win the fight. What makes it competitive, what makes it intriguing, is Andy hasn't fought in a long time, and Jarrell Big Gravy is noticeably taller, noticeably bigger than the very portly, modest-sized Andy Ruiz. Yes, he's a modest-sized heavyweight. He's not as physically imposing as some of these lumbering lummoxes.
Not as tall, not as long, not as big, doesn't take up as much space.
Between what are two very flat-footed fighters that also happen to be mid-range to inside fighters, both Jarrell Miller and Andy Ruiz, they got the same sweet spot. They both like to play their opponents close to the chest. I think under normal circumstances, Andy is a more defensively sound fighter than Jarrell Miller because Jarrell Miller opens up quite a bit. He throws a lot of combinations, throws a lot of punches, and the more you open up, the more you can be caught in between. Whereas Andy, he's a counter-puncher.
Catch and counter-puncher.
Though after over a year of inactivity, what are Andy's reflexes like? His speed, his trademark hand speed that has often been dubbed some of the fastest hands in all of the heavyweight division. Is he going to be sharp enough and fast enough, accurate enough after that amount of time away from the ring? It's a genuinely intriguing fight.
3-star fight.
That has the potential to be fireworks because neither Andy Ruiz or Jarrell Miller are all that fleet of foot. They're both flat-footed fighters that are likely going to meet in the center of the ring and just let them go.
And under normal circumstances, where I would go with Andy, the outcome is not quite clear because he's been out of action for so long. Let's say that he wins.
Just for argument's sake, hypothetically speaking, let's say Andy Ruiz beats Jarrell Miller by way of a points decision. Let's say that he does that. He wants an Anthony Joshua trilogy, but if he can't get one, what else can he do?
I'm not against a trilogy, by the way, but if for some reason that can't happen, what can?
Well, he could always fight the winner of Wilder versus Anderson, set to go down on that same show, on that same card in August, provided that Wilder beats Chang in June.
Remember, Turki Al-Sheikh recently stated he wants to put Wilder in the ring with unbeaten up-and-comer Jared Anderson so long as Wilder beats Zhang. If he does, he can fight Anderson, and then the winner of that fight can fight Andy Ruiz.
You could do that in America, too. There's an American audience for a fight like that. If that doesn't work out for whatever reason, maybe you could do Andy Ruiz versus Joe Joyce.
I could go for that.
Andy Ruiz versus Joseph Parker 2, what would be Andy's revenge or attempt at it against the man who gave him his first professional loss. There are a lot of options out there for Andy, so long as he beats Jarrell.
Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder, Jared Anderson, Joseph Parker, Joe Joyce.
And that's not even all of them. The list goes on, but before it becomes about any of them, Andy's got to beat Jarrell. Let's see if he can. As it pertains to the potentiality of a third Joshua versus Ruiz fight, Anthony Joshua was asked if he'd welcome a trilogy fight with either Alexander Usyk or Andy Ruiz, and he said, I would love to compete with Usyk, but I don't think that's the number one pick on the fans' wish list. I'd love to fight Usyk, I'd love to fight Ruiz, but I think the fans want me to head towards Tyson Fury.
Well, what if Fury loses?
You can still do it. How many times have I told you? Anthony Joshua stands here today with 3 losses on his record, but he's still the number 2 earning athlete in all of boxing. People still want to see him fight. They go to his fights. They care about his fights in spite of the losses. So if Tyson Fury were to lose, that would not take away from this fight's marquee value and marketability.
We are returning to a more traditional era of boxing where so much emphasis is not placed on the unbeaten record. The haze of the Mayweather era is wearing off. Don't you see? Wilder's got, 3 losses?
Ruiz has got 2, Zhang's got 2, Dubois got 2.
So what's one to Tyson Fury?
I understand the effect that could have on Tyson Fury's psyche, his ego, that he might be the kind of guy to where if he loses a fight, he's never the same after that. And I understand that, but that's on him. The bottom line is, him losing to Alexander Usyk doesn't kill the Anthony Joshua fight. Whether Fury wins or loses, you can still make that thing. Anthony Joshua, on His Excellency Turki Al-Sheikh's plan for him, what he says is, in the future, I want people to look back at your record and say that you took on the best. I said, now you're speaking my language. We're on the same page, and he's on the same page as the fans as well. I know they want that big fight with Tyson Fury, and he's working on it, but Fury's got his obligations with Alexander Usyk, so I've got to make sure I keep steamrolling through opponents so I can get closer and closer to the opportunity of me versus Fury.
The observant ones already know that.
The observant fight fan that Anthony Joshua's track record so far already tells that story. Unbeaten Dominic Breazeale, unbeaten Dillian White, unbeaten Charles Martin, unbeaten Joseph Parker.
That's 2 unbeaten champions.
A seasoned former champion and a Hall of Famer with a Hall of Fame career in Vladimir Klitschko.
2 Olympians in Alexander Povetkin and Kubrat Pulev.
Andy Ruiz, you have to count Andy Ruiz. He beat Anthony Joshua, then Anthony beat him in their rematch.
Otto Wallin and Francis Ngannou.
Don't try to minimize those victories. Don't do it. Those guys were good enough to give Tyson Fury a hard night and a hard fight. Those 2 guys were good enough to give Tyson Fury all he could handle, and Anthony beat the both of them easy. See, if you're observant, when you're looking at Anthony's record with context, it already tells that story.
And what about Wilder?
Well, we would have got the Wilder fight a long time ago if Wilder hadn't have rejected DAZN's $100 million offer. In more recent years, we would have got the Wilder fight if he wouldn't have lost to Parker late last year. You can't put that on Anthony Joshua. And now, if His Excellency has other plans for Deontay that involve another heavyweight,
You can't put that on Anthony.
who already has the most comprehensive resume of top heavyweights in this era. There are only 1 or 2 names missing.
Fury is one among them, but that could soon change. Whether he takes care of business with Usyk or he doesn't, you can still make that fight.
Moreover, I don't place anywhere near as much emphasis on a Wilder fight as I used to, because Wilder's already been trashed by Fury. And who is it that Turki Al-Sheikh wants to put in the ring with Anthony?
Fury?
The Fury fight is an even bigger fight and a more important fight than a Wilder fight, and that's where the focus seems to be. So I'm not losing sleep if that ship has sailed for Joshua versus Wilder. Not saying that it has, but if it did,
That ain't the biggest or the best fight you could hope to make anyway. Joshua versus Fury. Oh, that's a 5-star fight.
5 stars if Fury beats Usyk and becomes undisputed champion. 4 stars if he loses. 4 because it's still a great fucking fight that I'm sure the Brits would still want to see.
Oh, I'm not even British, and I'd still want to see it.
This era of heavyweights that we're in right now, it's winding down. Deontay Wilder is very close to the end. So is Alexander Usyk. So is Tyson Fury. And in some ways, so is Anthony. And we're getting that much closer to catharsis.
A conclusion.
A clearer picture of who this era's premier heavyweights really were. Who really was.
Who was number 1? Who was number 2? Number 3?
Many thanks to His Excellency for making this possible.